Are the new Apple Silicon Macs just hype or should we all upgrade? Hi, this is David of Tech for Baba, a channel I share my experiences on how technology enhances my time with kids and family as a dad. If this is your first time here, welcome. Please consider subscribing. In today's video, let's see what's so good about these Apple Silicon-based Macs and if we should upgrade. Apple just introduced 3 new Macs, a new MacBook Air, a 13-inch MacBook Pro, and the Mac Mini. The exterior designs are all the same as before, but there's a huge change inside. It's no longer Intel inside. These Macs have the new Apple M1 chip inside. Apple claims it has much more processing power with an 8-core CPU, an 8-core GPU, and a 16-core neural engine for machine learning processing. Not only can the M1 chip process a lot faster, it uses less energy doing so. It runs much more efficiently than the Intel CPUs. Hence, the battery life is also improved, up to 15 hours on the MacBook Air and a whopping 17 hours for the MacBook Pro. That's much longer than what we've been used to with laptops. It's a very impressive accomplishment, very exciting. More performance with less energy. Shouldn't we all just upgrade then? What's the catch? First, the change from Intel CPU to Apple's M1 chip is a much bigger hardware change than a typical Mac update. Last time Macs made such a big change was 15 years ago in 2005 when Steve Jobs announced Macs would transition from PowerPC to Intel processors. Basically, different CPUs speak different languages. The Intel CPU understands and speaks the x86 instruction set, while the M1 chip, an ARM-based processor, speaks and understands a different language called the ARM instruction set. Applications or software programs are like books which need to be translated from the x86 to the ARM instruction set before they can be understood by the new M1 chip. Since Apple announced this transition a few months ago in June 2020, software engineers have been working hard translating or rewriting their software for the new Apple M1 chip. Apple said many programs like Apple's own Final Cut Pro has now been translated and optimized for the M1 chip, but there are still many programs not ready yet. For example, Adobe's Photoshop would not be ready until early next year. Apple does have an emulator, Rosette 2, which can run these not yet ported Intel chip programs in the meantime. However, an emulator is like a translator on the fly. There will be overhead for running this translation on the fly, so these apps or programs would not be able to take full advantage of the M1's performance with the emulator. Also, we can only go with the performance info Apple provided us so far, since none of us have seen or tested these new Macs yet. Some of these claims are vague, like this chart comparing the M1 with the latest PC laptop chip, without stating exactly which PC laptop chip it is. Apple is usually quite true to their claims, and we've already seen great performance per watt with the new A14 chip on the iPhone 12 and the iPad Air. However, we won't know for sure about the M1's performance until we get our hands on these new Macs. Subscribe to my channel and stay tuned. So, should you upgrade? I think yes, eventually. I suggest waiting at least for the benchmarks to come out before pulling the trigger. But if you're excited about how much better the M1 chip performs like me and just can't wait, here's what I think about the 3 new Macs. If you're looking for a desktop, Mac Mini is the only one available now. It's a great deal starting at $699. Remember, you need to get a monitor, a keyboard, and a mouse unless you already have them, so there will be additional cost. It gets a bit more complicated if you're looking for a new laptop. If we look carefully at the specs, they're almost the same. They both have the same M1 chip, same memory and storage options, same 13-inch display. The Pro is a little bit brighter at 500 nits, about the same size and weight even, with the MacBook Air a little bit lighter and tapering thinner towards the front. Same old 720p FaceTime camera, which is too bad. Both have 2 speakers, but the Pro is more dynamic and has better mics. Same keyboards, except the Air has physical function keys, which I actually prefer over the Pro's touch bar. Same Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5.0, same 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports. And lastly, both have improved battery life, with the Pro lasting 2 more hours than the Air. Amazing battery life, really. The MacBook Air does start with just 7 GPU cores instead of 8, but that's just a bin variation during production. It's the same M1 chip design. For me, the biggest difference actually doesn't show up on this spec sheet. The MacBook Pro has a fan and the MacBook Air doesn't, so the MacBook Air will run nice and quiet like an iPad. So why pay $300 more for a noisier MacBook Pro? Even though it's the same M1 chip, this difference in thermal design will affect the performance between the MacBook Air and MacBook Pro. Since the MacBook Air doesn't have a fan to actively cool itself off, its M1 chip's clock speed will be capped or limited when it gets hot. It won't be able to sustain high performance for a long period of time. On the other hand, the fan in a MacBook Pro will keep it cooler to sustain higher performance longer. So if you plan to use the MacBook to mostly consume content like browsing the web, watching YouTube videos, occasionally writing some documents, do some simple photo editing, a little casual gaming now that it can run all the iOS games as well, I think the base MacBook Air with 8GB of memory is a great choice. If you're using the MacBook mainly to create content like video editing or to play GPU-intensive games, even though we don't have exact benchmarks yet, the MacBook Pro will perform much better longer. I'd also go with the 16GB of memory to make sure there is enough headroom in the long run. The new Apple Silicon Macs is certainly no hype, especially if the M1's performance and efficiency are as Apple claimed. Again, I suggest waiting a few weeks for confirmation on the performance numbers if you can. What I really can't wait for, even more powerful versions of the M1 chip or the M2 in higher-end desktops and laptops, sometimes next year. Thanks for watching. If you find this video helpful, please help me by smashing the like button and sharing the video with others. Which new Apple Silicon Macs are you considering? I'd love to know why in the comments below. If you want to see more videos on how technology can enhance our life with kids and family, please subscribe and turn on the bell to be notified when I put out my next video. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, cherish each moment.